Welcome. Round 4 brought the encounter of my team against the team of Schachfreunde Deizisau. Unfortunately, all of my teammates had a pretty bad day in the office and lost all of their games. I had to try and protect us from a whitewash. Not an easy task at all, as I was facing former World Championship challenger and famous FN legend Gata Kamsky. Scared by the legend, I tried to serve from below and chop off every piece that might cross the Rubicon. I opened the game with a move knight to f3, and he played a setup with knight f6, followed by b6. Well, I didn't really expect that, so I was preparing a bit against the first move f5, which can lead to Dutch or anti-Dutch variations, and for his main weapon, which is the Schlechter variation of the Slav defense. So let's say, for instance, after c6, c4, knight f6, knight c3, he goes for a line with g6 and bishop g7 quite often. But of course, the setup with knight f6, c4, and now b6 is also not Schlechter. So therefore, I went for my typical setup with g3, followed by bishop g2, and now went for a double fianchetto line, which is a line that I have employed quite often, both with black and with white. So I drew a lot of games in this line, which gave me some confidence that I would also be able to draw this very game. And here he went for move e6, which is seemingly a bit more popular nowadays for people who want to avoid mass simplifications that arise after the old theorem move c5, which now in the line after knight c3, d5, which is the old main line, knight takes d5, takes, 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 d4, and again a lot of things will be exchanged, takes, 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 king takes g2, leads to a position which is probably equal, but black has to be a little bit precise. So that's a line which I have played several times. For instance, I drew a game with black against Ulf Andersen in this line. Instead, he went for e6, and this is a line which I had seen once before. It was played against me in the Dutch league by the Dutch Grandmaster Benjamin Bock in a similar position, and that game also ended in a draw. So I was kind of prepared for that, and I just tried to mirror his play. So one other move that comes to mind here is an immediate d4, but first of all, he can jump always with knight to e4, and so it's not clear that this diagonal is really in my favor and that I really want to close up the position and close up this bishop. So I didn't really like this line with d4 already back then, and therefore I decided again to just go e3 and basically mirror what he does. So he went for c5, to which I now replied d4. So now the game opens up, and he has a couple of alternatives here. So he could, for instance, go for d5. He could go for a little bit of a more slow setup with queen e7, but he went for just c takes d. And here I was not really willing to go for the most principled approach. I think the most principled move here is to go e takes d4, and now say after d5 to go knight e5. So I saw that this is probably the way to play if I want to play for an opening advantage. But let's say if he goes queen c8, threatening d takes c, the structure is very, very complex. And I might get these hanging pawns on b4 and on c4 and d4. And it's just strategically a very complex position to play. And it can easily be that my pawns here on c4 and d4 become weak. So therefore, I didn't really want to go there. And I just decided, okay, I will play knight takes d4, which will probably lead to a draw in the end, and I was completely fine with this against this legendary player. He took on g2, and now he went for knight c6. Note that after d5, similar mass simplifications are going to arise. Let's say takes, takes, and queen f3, and now queens are traded, and the position is just equal. So instead he went for knight c6, and yeah, again, maybe I can play in a slightly more ambitious way, but I think here it's more or less clear that black has equalized. So I didn't see any reason not to take on c6, which now just leads to a completely equal position. He decided to trade down further with queen takes d1, and now I followed my plan and just exchanged all pieces such that we ended up in this position pretty early on. On move 17, we only have the 2 minor pieces on each side left, and the position is just a dead draw. At least that's what I thought. He came up with a move knight to d7, and I think here is the first position where I went wrong a little bit, and I think I should go f4 and now just play similarly as in the game. But if I force him to exchange bishops, then at least I get my knight to d3 and I block the squares on c5 and e5 with a knight. And thus I think there's really nothing he can play for anymore, and a draw should be agreed very soon. Instead, I wasted one tempo with a move bishop takes g7. And after king takes g7, I played the move f4. Yeah, f4 has the goal of playing against either knight to e5 or king to e5. But it, of course, comes at a small price of weakening the square on e4, which might be a potential entry square for his knight later on. So he now very calmly played the move king to f6, king f3, and king e7. And now one realizes that this structure is a little bit better for black, because the black king has a potential way of attacking my pawns on the queen side. So if this c6 pawn was on c5 already, the position would be a dead draw, or maybe even slightly better for white. But with this pawn on c6, I have to be careful that the king doesn't enter on my queen side. Therefore, I now played the move knight to c3 to counter a potential king d6 just with knight e4 check, blocking the c5 square. And he went for knight to c5. In this position, I now first thought about going maybe something like g4, g5, but I was not entirely sure what to do after, let's say, f5, g5, and later on he might go e5. And I might regret that I don't have the pawn on g3 anymore, which protects the f4 pawn. I think still this position is just completely equal, and I should just probably have gone for something like that. Alternatively, I can also go h3 and overprotect the g4 pawn, such that whenever he goes e5, I can take everything off, and so I can take and go e4. And something like this will lead to a draw, obviously. So instead of doing that, I played one more slightly careless move with the move king to e2. And now he played a5. And this was the only position in the game where I felt a little bit under pressure. It's not really anything tangible, but at least black played a couple of moves like bringing the king to a better position now, starting with a5, pinning down my queenside pawns. I can't really go a3 anymore, I can't really go b4. And you can imagine a scenario where the king enters on the queen side and white suddenly has to be careful. So therefore I now stopped, tried to regroup, try to make sure that I don't play in such a careless way with like king e2 and I don't go on like this, because I felt if I just now go on and play king d2, king e2 and wait, this might become quite dangerous. So for instance, after e5, I can't take on e5 because of king e6, and my pawn structure is just becoming worse and worse. So after e5, let's say king e2, f5, I was slightly worried that he might go e4 at some point, maybe bring a knight to d3, and then march with the king to the queen side. Of course, this should all be still holdable, but it's clear that black has taken over. and I didn't really want to be in that position. So therefore, I'm very happy with my next move, which is move e4. It's a little bit committal. It weakens the square on d4, but it drastically improves the position of my king. So in all these lines that we have seen before, where the king was stuck on e2, let's say with black pawn on e4, the king was the main problem. And right now, at the price of weakening the square, I get a much more active king, and I will put my king to e3, which will make it very, very difficult for him to enter via d3 with a knight, of course. So that's not possible anymore, and it's just much more comfortable for me to play with the king, because whenever he goes now f5, I can just take both pawns, and the position is going to be a dead draw. He played king e6, and I just went for knight e2. So in case he goes e takes f, I will just go g takes f. Also, I'm sometimes threatening to go f takes e myself, followed by knight d4. But yeah, there I have to wait for the right moment. So he went f6, protecting the e5 pawn. And now I played another move, which I think slightly improves my position, the move h3. Again, playing against a potential entry of the king to g4, which is very far away. But now I realized, okay, I play h3, and then I'm just standing still. I don't do anything anymore, and it will be very, very difficult for him to break through in any way. And that's also what he agreed to, and now played the move knight to a6. I went for knight c3, and I note that the plan with king to d6 always, so let's say king to d6 in this position. Here I can even think about playing f takes e and then knight to a4, or just an immediate knight to a4, and the position is absolutely fine. So therefore, after knight c3, he went for a repetition of moves with knight c5, knight d2, and knights are moving back and forth with a draw. So there's one other line I wanted to show, because this was a line I was thinking about during the game. And this is in case he goes knight to b4, with the idea of maybe taking advantage of this square on d4, and maybe putting some pressure on a2. So in this case, I think I have two options, which are both fine for white. One is to just go king d2 and say, okay, look, your knight is not really doing anything, and you're not going to start breaking through on the king side suddenly, because you're not going anywhere there. And yeah, that should just be kind of a fortress for white. Or after knight b4, I could even go a3 and take advantage of the fact that his knight is misplaced on a3 by not just going knight a4. And after b5, let's say I could go knight c5 check. I don't know if I should first take or not, but in any case, maybe takes, knight c5 check. He can never go king d6 because of knight b7, and I take on a5. And so after king e7, I just go knight b7 nonetheless, attack on a5, and if he moves, then I will win the last pawn. And the position is just a dead draw. So knight b4 would have been a last try for him, but I think both king d2 and a3 would save the game for me without any major issues. So he agreed with this reasoning, and after knight e2, the game was declared a draw due to 3 times repetition of the same position. Well, I think this was not a really exciting game, but I'm quite happy, of course, with the result, and in the end, that's what counts if you play against such a legend. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.
When you have stress, play chess. When you fall on your ass, play chess for a real deal, for Christian Seel.